Welcome to the Root of Power podcast, where I teach you how to chase your joy, find alignment, and create a life and a business that you love, using actionable methods, interviews, and inspiring stories from people who know that true freedom is found within. I'm your host, your always hype woman and sometimes ass kicker, Amanda Chills, and I am so proud of you for choosing to step into your power. Come along, we've got dreams to build. Okay, my love, I have put everything that I offer for free on one page so that we are not doing more work than we have to, because why would we do that? Hashtag work smarter, not harder. So livemyhappyhealth.com/free. You are going to find everything I've created for not only leveling up in your personal life and building a life that you love, but leveling up in your business life and building a business that you love. Okay? livemyhappyhealth.com/free. Love you. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. How have you been?
I've been fantastic. And I can say that and mean it, because so many times in my life I've said, oh, I'm doing great. I'm doing fine. But this time I've got my whole back behind it. Like, I'm doing great.
Say it with your chest.
Yes.
Love it. And you're finishing up school, or you're already done the semester?
I am doing some summer school right now, but I'm about to start my senior year. Yeah. Who would have thought?
Yeah, I would have thought. We knew you'd get there. Yeah, so maybe we can dive into school, because that was something that when you and I were working together was like, it was so, there was a lot of like wrapped up. There was a lot of like emotions wrapped up.
Yes.
There was like a history of like not doing well your first year, and then like figuring out how to do well in school, which is something like I run into with a lot of younger people, because sometimes high school is really easy, and then they get to college, they're like, oh shit, I don't know how to study.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or like I had, a first year that was a bad experience, and I'm terrified it'll happen again. And then like to you doing senior year, and then I would love to know the plan after. So like dive into all that.
Yes. So just like you said, when I was in high school, like, sure, I had some, depressive episodes or like normal anxiety, which is totally common when you're like hormonal teenager or whatever.
When you're
but
alive.
School was fine.
When you're alive.
Yeah. But I was always considered like maybe a higher achiever, but it's just because things came easy to me, especially when you have the foundation of like staying at home. But yeah, going to college, it's like the first time, you're so excited, or at least I was like, I'm going to have all this independence and get to make my own decisions. But as soon as that happened, it's like, I don't know what independence even feels like. It doesn't feel like a safe space. But, later in hindsight, I'm like, oh, because it was new. Like, that's why it felt the way it did. But having that, like, oh, I make my own choices. Oh, how do I do that? And so, of course, if you already have those existing like anxieties or depression, it got really hard for me. Like, just everybody hears the story. Getting out of bed was hard. Putting on clothes was hard. And it was hard because I was so used to walking in a classroom, like, I know I'm going to excel. I know that, my peers in the room, this is a comfortable space. You're used to being in your hometown, but then going, to a university, I was like, okay, this is all even playing fields. I've got to, meet the expectations. It was a lot of pressure. Yeah. And it kind of fell into, okay, I can't go to class because I don't feel good in myself. And, it was so hard. And that's whenever I had to say, what, if the grades aren't making it, I put so much emphasis on, my timeline and like, well, if I'm supposed to be completing this first year, I need to have so many credits. And if I'm failing these classes, I would just kind of take that and like staple it to my skin and be like, I'm a failure. Everyone else is doing it. And they're doing great, and it seems
which gets you like deeper into the spiral, and it's heavier and it's harder, and then it just makes everything worse.
And then anyone who's been in school that way, if you miss one class, it's like, might just miss that next one, or like, and then the third one, it's like, all those anxieties and worries and struggles that you had before, they're monumental, or at least they feel that way. Taking first steps was so hard for me. I was ready to dive in, and I dove in, and then I wasn't ready to assess like, okay, what is this space for me? I still tried to function how I did before. It's so hard,
You sound so wise.
But yeah, it comes much later is what I've found. You know, in the midst of it, it's like, where's my head? Do I even have one? Like, I know I'm having thoughts. Are they real? Are they true? Do they hold? You know?
Yeah.
But
and I think like that's so common with younger people where like the expectation and what's sold to people is that you graduate high school, you go to college the next year. And it's like that works for a number of people, but it doesn't work for everyone. And so many people so many young people feel like they don't really want to go, but that's the expectation. And you know, all my other friends are doing it. It's like, I'll go and I'll do it, but like they're maybe not ready. And, you know, in many cases, like that's the first time, especially going away to school, like that's the first time many kids, like 18-year-olds are away from their parents, who there is so much freedom that sometimes that freedom becomes paralyzing. And then they're like, oh God, I'm drowning.
Yes. And you can't help but have all that time to see like, well, this person's done this and this person's doing so well. And I particularly placed a lot of emphasis on my timeline. Like I kept thinking, in 4 years, I have to have this degree. You know, I'm going into my 6th year. And if I had said that beforehand, I would actually cry in the middle of the sentence. But now I can say, look, it's taken me 6 years because 2 of those I grew myself. And like, I would never, ever, you know, and I never thought I would say that with such confidence. And I used to feel so ashamed.
Like it's
like one day, one day I was like, why am I ashamed over, you know, it's so much easier when someone says like, how's school? How's it going? You feel like you've got to have this portfolio in front of you. Like, well, I'm doing this and this, and I'm doing great, by the way.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that, but I realized people are asking, how's your mental health journey? Or are you loving yourself? Or like, you wake up thrilled to be who you are? And it's like, no one asked those questions. I was trying to prepare myself for the other ones, but it's like, you can't have both, you know, or you can't have one without the other. You just can't.
100%. And I think you are just so wise, first of all. Can we just like,
thank you.
Hard-won wisdom for sure. I love that you're pointing out that like that decisions that we like, rules that we make up, right? It has to be on 4 years. I have to do it like everybody else. I have to have all these answers prepared and I can only be happy. And like all of that is rules that, you know, are given to us by our culture, by society, by family dynamics, whatever. But like, we just decide that they're true, even if they don't work for us at all. Like, so you didn't finish in 4 years.
Right.
In reality, who fucking cares?
Right. What you always encouraged me to say was like, instead of saying, why haven't I graduated, Morgan, why don't you address that? Morgan, you're in school. You're like trying to get a higher education. And that has been so helpful. Like anytime I would have
started working together, like, and you had undiagnosed ADHD that like,
raging.
I remember the time that you got on medication. And for people that know me, like I'm not someone who preaches medication often. It does 100% have its place, but I'm usually not starting there. But when you came and you were like, I think I'm going to get on meds for ADHD, I was like, fucking try it. Like, also the easiest way to figure out if you have ADHD is like, go get some Adderall, see if it works for you.
Yes.
And then like that really, from an outside perspective, was one of the things that made school doable, not only doable, but like, I don't want to say easy because I don't know how it's been for you, but like easier, where like it didn't feel like you were constantly climbing.
It felt possible for the first time.
Yeah. That was I remember that was so huge for you.
Yes. And what was so helpful was that, you know, I was seeing you for maybe about a year, and that's whenever I was finally getting like confident in saying like, oh, when I feel this way, I can identify where this emotion's coming from. And then you would say terms like, you know, if you feel this, hold space for it. And I remember at the beginning being like, what is she talking about? Like, you know, I'm coming here. It's like, you know, you come for these big, like life-changing phrases, and you kept reiterating this, you know, well, hold space for it. Don't identify with it unless you want to, but hold space for it. For the longest time, I'm like, sure, like I'll try, whatever. Like I'll do the things. But then one day I woke up and I was like, I'm actively doing this. And I'm not even thinking about it. And it's actually working, you know? And that's what's so hard about getting started in like advocating for yourself is where that change, you want it to be like, bam, I'm doing good now. And like, oh, this makes sense. And so for so long in that beginning period, I was like, I know we're making movement. Like, I know I'm feeling more comfortable talking about it, but I don't feel changed. But it's like one day I sat there and I was able to kind of look back at these phases of myself that I never considered before. Like, oh, just a month ago, I've grown so much in doing this, this, and this, all because I've said, what is this emotion? Where is it coming from? And do I need to carry it or not? And that was something you kept saying to me. Do you need to be carrying this, Morgan? You need to hold it, but do you need to be carrying it? And I'd be like, probably not. And you'd say, drop it. And then again, I'd be like, what does she mean? Just drop it. Like, me? Like, what do you mean? I live in this. But then later it's like, I dropped it way back there. I didn't even think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I love that you're saying all these things, because I think, one of my hopes and dreams and like talking to y'all, because I've got probably like 10 or 12 of you guys that I'm like, oh my God, like you are going to be so helpful, is that people don't know what therapy is, what it does.
Right.
Like, I've never heard of any other therapist interviewing past clients. Like, so, that would be helpful for other therapists to do. But I was like, well, who knows therapy better than people who've been through it, right? And like, I can talk all day, but you guys are saying shit that I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things where it's like, some of the things that you learn, some of the things that I teach are not concrete. It's not like me telling you how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Like, they are kind of abstract concepts where it's like, put an emotion down, and people are like, what the fuck do you mean?
Yes, that was me. I was like, okay, girl, like, I'll do the thing. I'll try it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, even sometimes if I try and explain, like, it's like you're holding it and you put it down in front of you, people are like, no, that's fake. But then it's like, when I say it enough, the brain gets it, and the brain's like, oh, put it down. Stop carrying it. Stop identifying with it. Stop making it your identity. And then one day you do it, and then you're like, oh, I feel lighter. And then it's like, oh, I put it down. And it's like, this has become something that you do naturally now because I've told it to you enough times.
Yes. Yeah. And now it doesn't even cross my mind. And then I start kind of spewing it to peers because just like you said, so many people around this age struggle in very, very similar ways.
Yeah.
And so like any chance I get, whenever I hear somebody say beep, 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 like this thing's bothering me, I'm like,
meerkat in your brain is like, whoop.
Right. But I tell them like, hold space for it and drop it. And they're like, what do you mean? But it's all just a process of however you want to frame it, whatever metaphor you need. It's just, do you identify with that thing? And if you don't identify with that thing, let it go. And then another thing that was so helpful was, you knew that I placed so much emphasis on what everyone else was thinking of me or approval of me. It's like one day you said to me, and that's people say like, when you go to therapy, what's changing? Like, what does it do? That's the biggest question. What do you talk about? How do you even get there? Where's the time? And it's like, it's usually these little tiny seeds that someone or even yourself will say. And then you sit there and you're like, wow, I can address that in so many different ways. So you would say, like, I would say, well, I don't want to do that because it would make, my friend unhappy, or it would cause pressure. And it was something as simple as just being a little bit selfish for myself. Like if someone wanted to make me spread a little thin before, I'd be like, okay, sure. And then suffer the repercussions later, nervous system, all of that. Yeah. Right. And so one day you said to me, Morgan, what if you just didn't or what if you just thought about it for you? Like, what if you just didn't? Because I would say like, well, what if it, and you go, well, what if you didn't think about that? What if you thought about how you felt? And I was sitting there like, I really don't think about myself first. You think that you do, but you're just so in this frame of like, being in school and being like, I have to get the good grades. And it's like, well, Morgan, are you able to go to class and learn the material if like deep inside yourself, you're so unhappy? It's like, what, Amanda? I think you might be right. No. Like, I really think you might be right.
What I'm not.
Right. And another thing was like, I was struggling so badly. And the thing that people say is like, I have a great, wonderful, stable friendship, group with people. And I have a great family and I have a wonderful support system and things are good financially or whatnot. But still, things are not making sense. Like, I'm still not happy. I'm still carrying negative thoughts. Like everything on paper looks like it should be fine.
Yeah.
And that's what's so toxic is you don't need to have a rhyme or reason to feel away. If you feel away, you feel away. And it's like you kind of address it that way. Yeah. And through our time together, I grew confidence to say like, okay, these are the things that I don't like. Cause you would say, what do you like about what you do and what you don't like? Change it. And I was sitting there like, I can change it. And you're like, yeah, you can change it. So then I got the strength to go see a psychiatrist. And they're like, oh, you have ADHD. You also have bipolar depression, bipolar 2. And I was sitting there and you would think it would be a moment where you go, oh my gosh, I have all the answers, and you break down crying or whatever. And I was sitting here like, sure, makes sense, because through our work together, I had already overcome these things. I just didn't have a name for it. And so, they bring up, do you want medication? And I do utilize it, ADHD meds as needed. But to be completely honest with you, I don't use it often and I don't need it often. In those moments where I think, the tools you gave me, I might need a little help, but it's usually just focusing in class. But I really don't. Most people think when you get a diagnosis, it's like, that's the moment where like, oh, everything makes sense. But I felt like I had already built myself back together by then, which is so important. I think you should address what can we do, like counseling, therapy wise, and then like address medicine if you're really not meeting that, but just some phrases, little tips, like I call them tools. Like Amanda gave me little tools. I've been carrying around my toolbox. It's not this thing that changed me. I just have tools because another thing is like people say
change you. Like that's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, the tools and you change the things. Yeah.
Yes. And they apply in so many different ways too. Like I would learn one just about like interpersonal relationships. And then I start applying it to my own relationship with myself. Like if I need to speak, kindly and communicatively and openly with someone else, I need to do that to myself too.
Probably
and honestly, I should be doing that first. Yes.
Yeah.
And that was so huge of like, you need to consider yourself. It helped a lot,
Yeah. Oh, you were so good. I love that you said like everything on paper looked really perfect. And I think that can be a barrier for a lot of people because they're like, well, everything, I should be happy. My family's good. I'm not struggling financially. I have some levels of privilege. Nothing is super wrong, but something is very wrong.
Yes.
And people get in this like should trap. They're like, well, I should be happy. Everything is fine. And it's like, okay, but if you're not, that's reason enough to go say like, let's untangle the spaghetti and figure out what the fuck is wrong so we can fix it.
Right. And it's so hard to advocate for yourself too. And I especially see, it was hard for me just to be like, oh, what is it? Like we go to therapy. It's so hard. Yeah. Because it's, starting therapy or starting counseling is so difficult because you're like, oh, I have to put all these things on the table that I never wanted to speak into
that I don't want to look at.
Right. But over time, you just become so comfortable with sitting with that and saying like, did this hurt me? Did it help me? I'll pick and choose. Yeah, absolutely.
Had you seen someone else before you came to me? I don't remember.
Yes. So now knowing it was bipolar 2, bipolar depression, I have a chemical imbalance. But when I was about 14 or 15, I was having depressive episodes, didn't know what it was about. I had very supportive parents who were like, okay, we'll, find some therapy. So because I was 15, we talked to my pediatrician and I met with a therapist through their facility. And to be honest with you, I didn't enjoy it. It felt too clinical for me. It felt like they were looking deeply for, okay, but what's the big thing? What's the thing? Like, you're not being honest with me. What's the thing? And, my thing was nothing. Like everything looks great. I should be happy and I'm not. Right. And so I got on some medication, sometimes they give you like a one size fits all pill and it helped for a while. It did. And that's great. But when it didn't is when I thought, I don't want to see this individual anymore. It didn't really fit me, but you did. But the thing that's so important is so many people will go and see someone and they're not really their fit. And that's totally fine. Like people think that if you meet with a coach or a counselor or a therapist, it needs to be great just then, but you can not like them. Like you can change, like that's fine. But the big key is if you're still not satisfied, keep advocating for yourself, keep fighting to
find someone who
because I wouldn't have met you.
Yeah.
Right. If I had just said, I didn't like that and I'm not going to do it again, my life would look so different. And like, I wouldn't be in control. I wouldn't be confident. I wouldn't be genuinely happy. You have to keep fighting for yourself. If you can't do it on your own, seek someone else. Like the best, like you even said it before to me, years ago, you said the best tool that we have is asking for help. That's the thing you've got. Yeah. Ask for help.
Yeah. And I think people think like they meet a therapist they don't jam with or who just is not good. And they're like, oh, therapy sucks. And it's like, no.
Right.
There's great and terrible in every profession. Like that person was either not a right fit or they don't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
yes. And they could be great, but not changing you.
They can be
and
great, but not right for you, which is whatever.
Right.
That's fine. I'm not for everyone either. Like that's okay. Go find someone who you do jive with, and then the work is so much easier. It's so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So what are some of the things that here's a thought, and then I'll ask the question. What's really cool about the work that I do and having done it as long as I've done it and kind of like keeping a relationship with some people that I've seen for like after, is that I get to watch them be lighthouses for other people. So like people who feel better, who heal, in my experience, especially the people that we work with, so I'm going to assume it's normal, then turn around and help other people. So they go, I'm a little higher on a ladder than you. Let me pull you up. Not to the point where you're like overextending or creating helplessness or enabling, but just to say like, here's what I learned. Let me share it with you. And it's so fucking cool to watch people be a lighthouse. And then you're like, oh, you're struggling? Let me drop some wisdom on you. Take it, don't take it, whatever, that's on you.
Right.
But like, and it's really awesome to watch. So like, what are some of the things that maybe you teach the most often now that you learned? Does that make sense?
Yes, there were a couple, and I actually wrote them down. Like, what were my biggest takeaways? But essentially, what are the things I'm telling myself, like, on a daily, if not weekly basis? And the big one is, like, identifying what's your responsibility, what can you control? So my big thing was people pleasing, or I don't like confrontation. So if someone were to, confront me about something, it's okay, I'll say or do whatever it is to diffuse this, even if it means sacrificing myself. So a thing that I say over and over to people, if I see them being, extensive givers or spreading themselves too thin or whatever, is just say, your responsibility is to learn and control your emotions and how you handle things. And, if someone feels a certain way about you and you don't identify it, that's a them problem. It's not a you problem. That was a big thing for me, is like this thing that, people will come to me and say, I'm struggling with this. And I'd say, okay, is it a you problem or is it actually a they problem?
Right.
Because if it's a them problem, you do still have some responsibility. Right. Yeah. Like you have a responsibility to say like, hey, I'll communicate with you openly about it, or, like I'll give my piece, but it's not your job to make it better if it's a them problem. Like obviously there's a fine line of like, okay, but are you the problem? But, sometimes I would sit there and think like, if someone was asking something of me, what does this do for me? And if it's nothing, should I really do it? And, so that was a big thing. And then another one is just identifying where emotions come from. Like, whenever I first met with you, I felt what I kept saying was, I'm frustrated. I am so frustrated. And you'd say, why do you feel frustrated? And I'd go, I don't know. Or you'd say, if you're, feeling this way, what are things that'll make you happy? And I'd go, I don't know. Like, I'm not really sure what that even would look like. So the big thing was like, I don't know, forget where I was going with this. Like,
you'll get there.
Yeah. Can you remind me how I started that off?
Yeah. So you're saying figuring out where emotions came from.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I came and I was feeling like I'm frustrated, but really I was fearful about everything. And so like you got to deconstruct kind of where it's coming from. Like if you have an interaction with somebody and you're like, oh, I'm just so mad at them. Well, are you mad or are you hurt? Because if you're mad and you really are angry with that person, then be angry. But if you're hurt, maybe instead of being angry, you could say like, the best thing is just brutal honesty. And I know you talked about that a whole lot. Like You know, if I had issues with somebody, it's like, let's tiptoe and dance around the thing and not say the thing because it causes less problems.
It never gets better.
Right. But it's inauthentic. You're not going to feel satisfied. So what I always say is like, be brutally honest, say the things, because what's the worst thing that can happen?
And not even brutal, because you're not a brutal person, right? Like there's just no way. Like not even brutal, just honest. Like, hey, you hurt me. What you did was not okay. Some people will be like, oh my God, you're so brutal. And it's like, oh, okay, I could have been a lot worse. But just being totally honest with people is, and it clears up things so quickly. So when people come and they're like, I could never, I'm like, okay, well then keep suffering. Like that's on you. But like one or two conversations changes the trajectory of a relationship forever to be better. And it's like, have those 2 conversations and then it's better for the rest of your life. Like give me those odds.
Yes,
please.
And the amount of weight that's lifted too, like, you know, you gain that confidence and then almost a level, like I wasn't selfish enough with my time and my energy and kind of like my empathy for people. Things like that. And so in the beginning, like some friends or peers of mine would be like, Morgan, you've changed. Like you're kind of being selfish. And I'm like, you know, it's crazy that, you know, I can start to be selfish. I'm not acting terribly selfish. I'm hitting that borderline selfishness for myself. But the biggest thing for me was like, I was quick to just be angry and frustrated all the time. I would have that cycle of like, I'm okay. And then it's like these rumblings. And this would be the moment where like, maybe I should be honest with somebody about how I feel, but I wouldn't. And it would kind of come to this explosion and then weird discomfort back into that cycle. But then when I learned to be like, okay, in this moment where I'm feeling that brew, how about I say the things, which was like unheard of for me. What if you just said the things? Like,
what if you just said the things?
No. Like, but I've started to say the things. And then instead of those worst fears happening, people are meeting me in the middle. And it's like, oh, and now without even noticing, I'm setting boundaries. Like, what is happening? And so you set all these little boundaries in your life just by having these little different pathways of thoughts and just without meeting with you and talking and having those conversations of what if you did this? You know, why do you feel that way? Or why are you carrying that? Or whatever. I would sit there and think, oh my gosh, I'm carrying so much weight that genuinely does nothing. Like,
and is not
the best thing I can do is just be authentic and communicate openly with other people and yourself. That's the biggest thing too. Is like, just be open and honest about yourself. If you're like, anytime I was angry, I'd be like, why am I angry? Well, maybe I'm a little bit hurt. Okay. Is this hurt coming from something I fabricated, or do I feel like this person hurt me? And if I feel like that person hurt me, I don't just wait around forever and wait for them to come and fix it. It's my job to say, hey, you hurt me. And if they meet me in the middle, great. If they don't carry it. Hold the space, drop it. I mean, it's just been such a thing everywhere I go. Yes. And
how much better are your relationships now?
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Like relationships everywhere, friendships, parents, even just day-to-day interpersonal reactions in class. I'm just so much more confident because what I say is not rooted in fear or like a tiptoe or an eggshell. Because the worst thing about anxiety is you can walk on eggshells that you set in the room. Like no one else put them down. You did it for yourself. But then you have that moment of like, what if I just didn't do that? What if I just walked in this room with a strut and said, this is how I feel. If you don't like it, that's fine. I'll leave it behind. And it just changes everything. I used to take things way too personally, or like, you know, if one feeling of mine was like spoken into existence or confirmed or whatever, I would be like, oh, well, that just must be me. Let me staple it to my shirt and wear it every single day. But it's like, no one will know me like I know me. No one will know you like you know you. If you don't like it, don't carry it. It's so freeing. It really is.
And so often what I find is it just takes me or, you know, someone saying like, you don't have to do that. And then people are like, like it's they literally like, I watch them recalibrate their brain. And they're just like, what do you mean I don't have to do that? It's like, you don't have to. And then people are like, oh.
Yeah. But then as a client, you walk away and you're still at first in that space of like I heard her and I kind of get it. But like, I'm not sure how I'll implement that. But then as you go on, you're doing it. Like you're doing it. And then you, like you said, you are spreading it to other people. I've had people, I'll be very definitive about communicating, saying like, hey, like, I hear what you're saying. Don't really like that though. I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to whatever. And somebody will say, how'd you do that? How did you do that? And it's like, well, I just think in my head, these little steps of what is this thought or thing doing for me? Is it good or bad? Is it my responsibility? Should I carry it? No. Like, so helpful. Yeah.
And life is a lot easier when you don't have like 1,000 pounds on your back.
Yes. Yes.
24/7. It's like,
yes.
You have so much more energy. That's probably something that like a sneaky thing that people don't really realize is they have so much more energy because their energy isn't wrapped up running from bears 24/7 or fighting something 24/7. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally different.
Yeah, that was a big thing for school too. Like you kept saying like, I don't know how you think you can swim when your head's underwater. Like, I don't know what you're doing. Cause it's like, if these things weren't making sense in my life, of course I wasn't going to be, and yeah, absolutely. And now, I don't put so much emphasis on the timeline. I'm worried about what works for me, and things are great. And I think back to myself before. And if I ever imagine myself saying, yep, I'm finally on my senior year, but it took 6 years, or it's going to take 6 years, that would have made me crumble. Yeah. But now whenever I say that to people and I have that confidence, finally like, yep, took 6 years, but I'm in a way better headspace now than I would have been in 4.
And you would have never done it in 4. You
right.
would never have done it in 4 had you forced yourself.
Yes. And toxic thoughts would say, oh, don't say that it's taken you 6 years because, they're going to judge you or whatever. But my response is always, thank you for saying that because I had this experience, or I know someone else who had this experience. And so many times I'll say that and they'll say, I'm in that experience. And then it's just, the taboo is gone.
Yeah. And it's such a permission giver when you're just honest.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, yes. That honesty is so powerful. Are you still what are you studying?
I'm in psychology, so I'll graduate with a psych degree. And then the hopes are that I might take a gap year, not sure, but the hope is to go to grad school for social work and become a counselor.
Dude, hell yeah.
Yeah. So I'm on the path.
A gap year. That sounds exciting.
Well, it wouldn't be by choice. I'm not so confident if I'll get into grad school or not, but we'll see.
I'm very confident you'll get into grad school. So
we'll
you can just borrow mine. You can just borrow my confidence.
Right.
What else? Okay, so one of the hopes and dreams for this is like pull back the curtain on therapy and kind of let people know that there's sometimes you will get an aha, but there's no like one thing that you're like, I'm fixed now, blah. But it's a lot of little things that stack. It's change this word, change this thought, try this thing, alter this thing. It's like all those little dials eventually, dial you towards what you're wanting. So so I know you said like putting yourself first and learning that like, oh, I actually get to choose what I do with my time, my energy, my attention are really helpful. What other things were like helpful?
One thing that always comes to mind to me is just like you said, people say they wait for this big thing to be like, oh, I'm fixed or whatever. But throughout that journey of seeking help and getting therapy and counseling, I am better, but that doesn't mean that, throughout my life, things are always going to be perfect because I did that and I feel great now. Like the whole thing that I've tried to gather and tell myself, is because I know that life is crazy and I will be in a space again where I feel like exactly how I did then. But this time
I would challenge that.
Well, maybe. Well, I may feel similarly defeated. Maybe.
Yeah, like life can be rough.
Yeah. Obviously. Yeah, there are going to be trials and tribulations, but the difference now is that I know I am equipped. I know that whatever I face, I know how to love myself. I know how to be honest with myself and others. I know how to take care of myself. I know how to create space. I know how to sit with it. I know how to hold it. I know how to let it go. So now I know whatever I face, because I will face things. We all do. Life is never always perfect all the time because it's perfect this one time. It's going to go up and down. Yeah. But I know now that, taking my thoughts, really thinking about not letting them consume me. That's the biggest thing, I think, is not letting these thoughts and things, like if you are going through a depressive episode or you are having, problems with anger, or you do have very bad anxiety. It's like, that's not necessarily you. It's a thing you're experiencing. So what can you do to help make that experience a little bit easier until you're out of it? It's not, how do I make this thing not happen to me? How do I not get anxious? How do I not get depressed? It's, okay, if this thing comes to you, are you equipped? Are you going to be ready to say, I can get through this level-headed, still love myself along the way, and not hurt others either? Because that was the thing too, is like, when I was in the midst of my turmoil, I was hurting people around me, not intentionally, but because I didn't have myself in check. Like, if I didn't love myself, I mean, it's so true that hurt people, whether you know it or not. And so now I know, if I have these things, I can handle them. It's my responsibility. Carry myself correctly, not hurt myself or others, not let it consume. I can overcome this, because time is your biggest partner too. Time will fix anything.
As long as people do the work,
that time, what do you do to help yourself?
It's inevitable that people get out of the swamp if they keep walking.
Yes. And if you told me that when I first walked up to you, like, this too shall pass, I was thinking, no, this thing is me, but over time I was stripping these things, like my anxiety is not me. It's a thing I'm experiencing. How do I make this experience a little easier? Or like when I'm feeling depressed, that is not me. It's not the person that I am. These traits are not myself, but I have the tools to be able to get through that piece, so.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Oh my God, this is so good. What do you want people to remember or know, or either of those?
I think biggest thing to know would be, even if you're the happiest person in the world, you could benefit from meeting with a counselor or a therapist or something like that, or having any kind of intervention. Like, there's something beautiful about talking to someone who isn't going to pass judgment on you. They're not going to, hold things against you. That's the biggest thing, I think, of just,
So if somebody's like considering, because I imagine like some people will like have done therapy and just be like, oh, like I want to hear about their experience, because humans are nosy little gremlins, which we love. But I imagine a lot of people will listen to these episodes who are considering therapy and are just like, man, I kind of want to know what it's like. What would you tell like those people who are maybe considering but haven't pulled the trigger yet?
I would say wait until you're fully ready to place anything that's bothering you right on the table. That's something that I tried to tell myself up front. Like, okay, I'm making this decision to go, and I know that this is going to be a tough journey. It's not going to be easy. That there are going to be moments where I'm going to hate it, or there are going to be moments where you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable, or you're going to think about the things you don't really want to think about. And the key is to just stay in that uncomfortable space. Obviously, if it's a harmful space, leave it. But if you're feeling that discomfort of the change, you're talking about the things you're not used to talking about, or you're confronting and addressing those feelings, laying it all on the table. If it feels uncomfortable, please stick with it. That's the biggest thing, because, there were even times where meeting with you where I was like, I just don't know if it's doing it for me. And if I had left in those moments, I don't even want to think about all the things that I missed out on. It's so important that if you're considering, and if you're considering going, you need to think, I'm going and I'm going to learn all these things and I'm going to implement them into my life. It's not going to miraculously change my life, but I'm going to get these skills, these tools, this information that's going to heal me from the inside and out, and I'll be able to use it. But it's hard to get started. It really is.
And it will change.
It's hard to tell people. It really will.
I can do it for you.
Walking in, I had the hope of, I'm going to hope and I'm going to try. I'm going to hope and I'm going to try that this is going to work. But having left it, it's a guaranteed. It changed my life. It will continue to change my life. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you feel anxious about it, good. I mean, if you didn't feel anxious about confronting these things, it's scary. It really is scary. But what I kept thinking about myself is, no one's going to advocate for myself if I don't do it for myself. And if I'm implementing things myself and it's still not working, I can go seek help and it's fine for me. Like, that's just so important. It's to tell yourself that if you want to pursue that, do it and do it full-heartedly. Yeah. If you want to change your life, therapy's not going to change your life if you don't want it to change. That was a big thing too.
Through and implement.
Absolutely. You got to walk in there being like, okay, I'm going to get this information. I'm going to pick and choose what applies. Cause if somebody says something, you can say, don't really like that. Toss it aside. You pick and choose what tools you want to put in your toolbox. But the best thing you can do for yourself is to give yourself options. Even because people think, well, I don't need to go to therapy. I'm generally happy. It's like, ideally for me, I would love to say I am a very happy person in my life. I love what every facet of my life looks like. And if you're sitting saying, yes, and it seems crazy that like, oh, you can choose to be happy. Absolutely you can. But at first, when you're walking into it, it sounds crazy. It sounds absolutely bizarre. And it's all about a big hindsight, and it's all about time. Like there's so many times where I'll say something or do something and I'm like, man, you know what? I never would imagine that I'd be in this spot, but it's all because you give yourself that time and space. Yeah. You've got to do it for yourself. You have to, if you need it.
Yeah. Do the work. It gets better. That's something that like, obviously I try and remind people because like this, and I say all the time, this work is not for cowards. It's just not like you can't get what you say you want without doing what you need to do to get it. Like you can't say, I want to be happy. I want freedom. I want good relationships. Right. And then continue on your bullshit carousel.
Exactly.
No one is coming to save you. You do the work.
Yes.
But the work, like, and I'm probably biased because for me, like, it's the same work with everyone, even though everyone's journey is different, but like the things that we work on are essentially the same.
Yes.
A lot of the work is really simple. It's simple.
Absolutely.
No to things that make you want to die. Say yes to things that light you up. Get rid of people who are assholes. Stop treating your body like shit. Some of these things are so simple, but simple doesn't always mean easy, which is where having like, I like to say I'm the Maui to people's Moana. Like we're having a Maui is very useful.
Yes.
That's the vibe.
One piece of advice that you gave me that was always helpful was, you would say, oh, it left me.
I'm sure it was good.
Oh, it was just, I'll think about it.
It'll come like as soon as we hit stop recording, then I'd be like,
no, really? Or like 3 a.m. Yeah.
It was this, Amanda. Make it a reel. Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful.